Welcome, everyone, to episode 10 of Landed's Fast Casual podcast. I'm super excited today to have Ari from Showmars. Say hi, Ari.
Hi, Vivian. Hi, everyone.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, and it's really great to be your host today. I am really excited to jump into everything that Ari has to share about his experience being an operator, but also thinking about restaurant technology and digitization of a lot that's going on in our industry. So I will start out by passing it over to Ari to start with an introduction about himself.
Thanks again, Vivian. It's an honor to be here. Just forewarning, I'm recovering from bronchitis, so if I do have to take an extra water break through this, please forgive me. Ari Ziogas here with Showmars out of Charlotte, North Carolina. We're a fast casual concept that's a blend of classic Southern fare and Greek food. Been around for 40 years, and we have 32 locations and just a slow, steady growth in the Carolinas. We operate in North and South Carolina. Personally, myself, I've been in the industry since I was the day after my 14th birthday. Actually, I went to work for an uncle of mine and his restaurant. And there was the love affair began then. I've just been passionate about the industry my entire life almost. The learning never stops, no matter how long you've been in it. Just I asked one of my early bosses from right out of college, who's been in the industry for decades. I said, if you were learning wise, when do you feel like you're fluent enough to in the operations and everything to kind of take it on your own? And he says, I'm still learning. I've been doing this for 40 years. So we continue to learn about the industry and especially nowadays as it evolves ever so quickly.
Absolutely. I mean, things have been moving so fast. Like a number that you threw out when we were first talking about this was that the digital ordering space has 5x'd since COVID. So
yeah, for us personally, that's true. Yeah,
that's a crazy number. So one of the things that we're kind of thinking about a lot is, and a lot of hospitality groups, restaurant groups are thinking about is like technology on the customer experience side. Because, obviously good food and good service is important. Like those are kind of core to hospitality, but like oftentimes that's not necessarily enough anymore, especially as the consumer has evolved post-COVID, right? They're looking for things like instant gratification. Experience is so important nowadays. Like what is the actual experience of maybe like doing that online order, picking up their food, receiving the food? Sometimes like that experience is completely out of your hands, right? It might be with a third party delivery. So how are you thinking about like guest experience at Showmars or like, in the industry as a whole?
Yeah, so guest experience has always been something that we've put a lot of emphasis on. Our service model for dine-in, which was a majority of our revenue source pre-COVID, our service model is very personal touch. You'd order at the counter, we'd bring the food to the guest. We still do. And just have a very attentive wait staff that is gonna keep your drink full, clear your table as you finish. We even go as far as opening doors for people and welcoming them when they come. Southern hospitality, if you will.
Yeah.
So COVID, all of a sudden, our doors are shuttered, and we have to convey this element that has helped define who our brand is in a different way. And so, we looked for ways to do that. We were fortunate enough to be roughly 35 to 40% off premise pre-COVID. So we were fortunate enough to have that foundation to be able to pivot quickly into an off-premise and 100% off-premise model. So we looked for ways to convey that high level of service by making ourselves as accessible as possible. So in a time where many people were afraid to leave their home, we didn't have delivery per se. We didn't have curbside per se. We didn't. We may have been in our very, very early days of delivery. Then I don't recall the exact time we started doing marketplace. But we really invested a lot of time and effort and energy into perfecting relationships with DSPs. We embrace them. I know a lot of the industry just looks at them as a necessary evil. I beg to differ. I know it can be an uphill battle in that sense, but if you learn to kind of coexist, you're really putting yourself in front of customers that may or may not know who you are.
Sure.
And it's an opportunity to introduce your customer to your brand to your customer, to a new customer, and actually show them that you're a little bit more elevated. So we looked a lot at the packaging. We looked at our sealed delivery packaging, as far as not just food but beverages as well. We took a stab at self delivery as well, integrated through our online ordering service provider. Any opportunity at the curbside was another thing we touched on. We kind of turned our we have a few stores with pickup windows, just one full service drive-thru currently in the company. We plan to change that, but we looked at turning our parking lot into a full curbside. Call it, we weren't set up for drive-thru, but call it almost like a drive-thru.
Sure. Like a parking lot drive-thru.
Pretty much, yeah. So people were able to just tell us what spot they were, text us what spot they were in, and we bring their food out to them. I guess the common theme is meeting your customers where they want it to be met, and in some instances showing them where they want it to be met. And we in some instances we were able to kind of establish a new expectation for how service would move forward. Now things are kind of not pulling back, but things are kind of normalizing again. Let's call them. They're not. I don't think they'll ever be what they were pre-COVID, but we are starting to see people come back into the dining rooms again. That being said, we've definitely adjusted how we want to look at our footprints moving forward.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you brought up a really interesting point just now where you have your actual restaurants. So before COVID, you had it set up a certain way. And then you said that now, because probably, vast majority of your customers are experiencing Showmars as a brand via your packaging, via the way that you are showing up at their doorstep, not necessarily what your brick and mortar looks like. That's a very interesting thing, right? Because you can have a certain perception, different brands have different perceptions. I go there for good value. I go there to splurge a little bit more, but maybe I'm taking advantage of the environment. So I'm willing to spend a little bit more. Maybe I go there for just consistently good food and service. So there are kind of different ways that brands convey themselves to their customer. And it's not honestly it's not always the same. I don't think McDonald's is trying to be super high value, super this is not an elevated experience necessarily. You're going in, you know what you're getting. So given that, being able to kind of experiment with that perception through packaging, because that's really the way that they're seeing your brand show up at their doorstep, is an interesting one. So you mentioned things like quality seals, on your food, on even your beverages. That's great. I've started to see that in my delivery orders, and I felt that kind of puts the brand a little bit moves them a little bit more in that premium direction, because I'm oh wow, they actually have this special seal. The first time I saw it, I was what is this safety seal? And it's branded and everything, right?
Yep.
Some companies nowadays just use tape instead to kind of use to get to the same point, but those small details definitely go a long way. So like as a consumer, you're trying out these new things, you're pushing these experiences out. How are you actually getting like data, and how are you actually thinking about what a good, like what the metrics are that mean that you're delivering a really great experience? Because they're not within your four walls. You can't like just see like, are they smiling? Are they happy? Like it's harder to get that. So what are some of the things that you're looking at to determine like if what you're doing is effective?
So without having a whole analytics team on our small leadership staff, it's cut and dry. Really, we do have access to our merchant portals through our DSPs. We look closely every month. We have running KPI meetings, looking at how stores are performing in regards to their star ratings, to promise times, to service times, how delivery drivers are coming in and out of our facilities with what speed and all those components. The bottom line falls to volumes. So if we're seeing quarter over quarter growth, really is where we analyze that number. If we're seeing growth there, we consider it a win, and that we're doing things correctly. It's funny because we're so saturated in the Charlotte market, Charlotte, North Carolina market. We often look at some of our competitors and say, oh, they might be doing better than us, but we forget that, hey, they might have one location versus our 2 or 3 or 4 in this market, and so volumes are kind of split, but you can really just continue to drill down on the operations quality and say, hey, in the grand scheme of things, we're meeting the customer's expectations, even more so because drivers don't have to drive the extra mile to get to a specific store. They've got another option. So that was something we had to learn a little bit about as we were looking at our performance figures. But
that makes sense. And have there been any like new performance figures that you've looked at since, like, I know that dine-in and takeaway split has like really fallen in favor of like the takeaway world, right? With like third-party delivery, third-party partners that you mentioned earlier. If say like, 60-70% of your customers are like third party, like what other types of metrics are you tracking now, like in this new like digital ordering world?
I don't think we've really tracking beyond operations quality.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we're tracking new metrics. I think the fundamentals of the business have remained the same for us.
Yeah.
Perhaps some of the additional costs associated with that elevated delivery experience we spoke of earlier, and how we're managing those, because that does come at a price. And it's common knowledge many brands do inflated pricing on the marketplace, and we try to keep that as fair as possible.
Yep.
And maybe that's a metric, actually, just where the consumer's propensity is to expend. How much of a premium is that convenience factor really worth? That's probably something we have paid closer attention to now that I think about it. So.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, also part of it's like, even before COVID, you were already set up for delivery and curbside. You just like really amplified that part of your business. So sounds like you're already tracking a lot of those metrics before. Now there might be a little bit more experimentation you can do on like pricing because you have just more volume in that like digital channel. But that makes a ton of sense. I mean, it sounds like you're already looking at the metrics. So just continue looking at operations.
To that point, to your point, we were kind of set up for it. Pre-COVID, I think as a brand, we were happy being not cutting edge with technology and all the digital initiatives per se, but being in the first third, let's call it, of the pack, and on the not the cutting edge, but close to it, let's call it. I think our mindset really shifted when that moment hit that we needed to pivot quickly. Yeah. And today our culture is much more so of, hey, look what this brand's doing. We need to be on that yesterday. That's kind of a major change that we've had.
That makes sense. I mean, I know that you're like the person in charge of all these new digital initiatives and finding and implementing new technology. So it's easy to see kind of what everyone's doing, but it's hard to kind of make it match like your business model and like operationally roll things out. So like when you're thinking about like technology, like what is your approach? Like, and how do you think, like, are there any specific types of technologies where you're like, hey, everybody who's listening, you need to be looking at this like right now if you don't have it? Like, is there something like that? Or is it like, hey, like here's just the approach that you can adopt? So like, tell me more about that.
We're an interesting organization in that our founder, George Cashel, set this organization up with operating partners in every store. And he did give some leeway to every operating partner. So with that history, we've evolved and we have our current structure today. But in that growth, we've got I think it can be a blessing and a curse. We've got a blessing is entrepreneurs throughout the company that are just smart go-getters.
Yeah.
But everybody has everybody understands the end. Everybody has a different means to the end. You have top line oriented operators. You have operators that accept their top line for what it is today, and are just gonna be totally bottom line oriented and just squeeze every penny out of that operation. Sure. And I don't know who's listening today, but I venture to say that your leadership team probably has some different personalities in it as well. I think to find success with any digital initiative, rolling it out, you need to have buy-in. How do you get buy-in? I think the best way to generate buy-in is being able to generate a clear ROI. Mm-hmm. That can be tricky because let's say in a high volume unit, ROI is an easier thing to demonstrate than in a low volume unit. So it's a pretty basic formula that I'm sure everybody uses, where you have your pilot stores. We try to look at, okay, how's this in our pilot store program? How's this going to perform in a low volume store, in a suburban store, in an urban store, and just a blowout high volume store, and find some correlations there before we farm it out. And in that process, we have data, we have other operators who can come vouch for how things are going to help get that buy-in and ultimately find success in those initiatives. As far as technology, to your other question, that I would recommend today, I think everyone's probably already doing it. You have to have some sort of digital ordering. You have to have some sort of I would say some sort of open API in your POS that can accept integrations with whatever partner you're trying to work with to achieve an end. Most people probably have that in today's world. I think some people were caught unprepared in the pandemic. But those are things that I would say are must-haves today. The world is evolving quickly, and you want to be, the next best thing might be around the corner. You want to be ready to engage it as soon as possible.
Sure. For some of the folks who are a little bit less technical in the audience, like what does an open API mean with your POS? Like, what would that look like? Is there something that you should be?
So that's basically cut and dry. It's just having a POS system that has the ability to integrate with other pieces of software. Right. Our CEO recognized that years and years ago. Probably when I was still just operating a corporate store at that time, and we set forth on migrating from our legacy POS system to a cloud-based POS system.
Mm-hmm.
That opened up a whole world of things for us. And that's about the time that, me being the younger guy on the totem pole, he tapped me to help lead our digital initiative. So I'm not a tech guy at all, and so it's been a learning process as I've gone along. But I think going to tech conferences, talking to peers, doing my own research, and seeing what other solutions are out there, I think that's been just a common, okay, do they integrate with our POS? I mean, that's kind of the heart and soul of your tech stack.
Yes.
So that's probably the one thing I would have to say that.
Awesome. Yeah. And you brought up, like, I mean, you come from an operating background, right? And you're operating partner, you've kind of worked your way up to now you're focused on digital initiatives. So like, I think a lot of businesses out there, like hospitality groups, restaurants, they were kind of thrust into this world of 5x digital ordering, or like 5x like technology adoption, much quicker like timelines. So a lot of folks like don't have necessarily that technical background. Like they're not like engineers, they're operators, right? So for folks who are like operators, it sounds like you kind of figured your way to where you are now and like went to some of these conferences, talked to folks in the industry. Like, how should a person who needs to implement technology, they know that, but how should they approach it if they don't have that technical background?
Yeah, I think a previous guest on the podcast talked about how this community is actually pretty open. Reach out to people. I've yet to encounter a restaurant executive or a tech someone from the technology team that was not, I don't want to say an open book, but not willing to share and give advice and give experiences. But also think about you can literally go broke spending money on technology. You really evaluate what solutions do you need, what solutions are nice to have but you can get by without, and what solutions are just fluff. Take a second and think about all those things, and carve a path with the needs, and then if you're finding success, build off that.
Yeah. That makes sense. Just like tap into the network. I mean,
Yep.
Probably if there's a problem that you're facing, you're not the first one to have faced it. Other
Usually
people
not.
have faced it before. Maybe not in today's environment, but they have like takeaways from when they was setting things up. Something that and actually like talking to service providers, we sometimes talk to other folks who kind of service a completely different part of like the restaurant ecosystem. So, we're very focused on hiring. We help people get, hire team members up to managers. But I talk to folks who are like thinking about AI drive-thrus. And, AI drive-thru, what does that look like? On paper, it could be amazing. Like, you're able to get higher order values. You're able to like move your drive-thru faster. I know some like QSRs, every 15-second increase yields like a couple hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, right? So It's like these kind of things you read about and you hear about, but then I was talking to a provider that just provides like internet to all the restaurants. So it's not something we think about, right? Because POS is all run on the internet, like on cloud-based, right?
Yeah.
They need internet to run. Your drive-thru needs internet to run. Well, most internets at restaurants are not like fiber.
Correct. Yeah.
They're not like fiber, like 1 gig, like internet speeds. Like there's like usually 2 networks. You have one for like the POS and all the like the must operate systems. And then you have like, okay, like, a guest who's coming in and wants to work on their laptop for a little bit. Then you have like that separate one. Right. But something that like kind of came up was, okay, like you want to adopt all this technology, but do you even have the internet speed to support it? Like, because AI drive-thru requires really fast speeds. Because if we're talking like a 1-2 second, 5-second lag on like the AI understanding what you're saying and like, processing that information, that might be like not as helpful as like maybe your current process. This like maybe you have a parking lot drive-through situation, right? So
we've actually bit the bullet and converted to fiber.
Yeah.
We're probably premature in doing so, and may be getting some pushback from operators. But I think in the long run, we're setting ourselves up for the future, like what you're speaking to now. So
yeah, and that's awesome. So like, you're thinking like right now, if you were to say, do you need fiber internet? Maybe not, but like what it allows you to do is like kind of set you up so that you can quickly iterate. I think that's like kind of like one of my takeaways from some of the stuff that you're saying is like the mindset is like based on the operator and based on the metrics, like then make some decisions, but make sure that you are set up to be able to actually support those decisions once you want to make them. Because if you're looking at like your competitor down the street and you know, moving to cloud POS might take you like a quarter to 2 quarters, like you're not going to get to have an open API if you have a legacy POS system. So then you can't have this other solution and that other solution that you really want today. And so like kind of like those two things that you were saying, like look for, make sure that you have some kind of digital ordering system, make sure that you have some type of open API with your POS. And if you ask your POS provider and they don't have that, probably want to scratch your head a little bit and think about you're probably thinking about, like what else do we need to look for there? And then really just like reaching out to the community. Like the community has done this big and small. Like, you know, what makes sense for a 1 location unit is different than like a 5 location, different than a 20,
sure.
different than 1,000. But the people who are at 1,000 locations were at 20 locations at some point.
That's correct.
So that makes a ton of sense. And I wanted to like, you know, in the short time that we have left together, I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on that pilot piece that you mentioned, right? You have like some kind of pilot framework for rolling out new technologies where you like select kind of based on geographies, you might select based on a few other things. What are like the timelines that you think about piloting? So I think that's kind of the missing piece. Like you have a framework. A lot of the time you have to make big decisions on little data. Like you might only have 30% of the data that you want, but you need to make a decision quickly because maybe you're going into your really busy season and you know that you can't make a decision during that time. How do you think about like the pace at which you move like those pilot timelines or like the assessments?
Timelines are tough, and they almost have to have, you know, when you're planning a project, you almost have to give yourself some contingency. You know, we're going to start this rollout, but hey, if we're getting into December, holiday season, not only is it going to be hard to implement, but if you do get an implementation in and something's not going well, are you going to have the support on the other side or is everyone going to be on vacation for the holidays? So,
Sure.
To that point, they get easier. The timelines get easier and quicker as you've found some success in different rollouts. I think one of the things to think about with timelines is give yourself plenty of time, and then leave yourself a way out as well if things start going south. Pretty, you know. Sure. Which typically they don't, if you've done your due diligence beforehand. Before you do get into that initial pilot store, really do your due diligence and getting things set up for it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Something that I always see makes like these pilots more successful is like have like very clear success metrics up front. Like I think a lot of the time you go into and you're like, I just want this to be better. Well, what does better mean? Because better means something different for like different people. And how do you actually measure it? Because if it's just like a point in time feeling, you can't record that. And you can't really objectively like evaluate against that.
Exactly.
Do I feel good? Well, I mean, how you feel might be more based on like other things, like not like how this restaurant is necessarily doing. So like kind of setting the success metrics up front and being really disciplined about it. Like here are the numbers. And if we can't collect these numbers, here's how we're going to start collecting these numbers so that we can like set some benchmarks and know how this is actually doing. And then after that, looking at what those success metrics are, think about like what's a reasonable time frame to actually see the success metric move. For example, if you're looking at a metric like general manager turnover, hopefully you don't have a ton of that. Like, you're not getting a ton of general manager turnover anyway. So maybe your like time frame for evaluation on that is a little bit longer than if you're looking at whether or not this saves your manager's time. Like, because like time savings can be something that's an input like immediately. So like first setting some of those data points and then setting like a time frame for that. And the time frames can change. Nothing's ever like set in stone, but setting those time frames and then having like set those meetings for everyone to get together to discuss those in the future. Otherwise, things always get busy. Things always kind of fall to the wayside based on whatever fires people need to put out. So having the discipline to like set those time frames and set like those success metrics up front, I think is like when everyone's like in the most logical state of mind, right? So they're ready to like, then 2 months later, you're like, oh yeah, I did actually think that was important. And I wanted to look at this again in 2 months. Well, amazing. I mean, that time flew by. I wanted to just have Ari, maybe you can tell us like the one thing that folks should take away from today's conversation.
Probably the biggest thing is be ready to meet your customers where they want it to be met, or they want to be met today, not want it to be met. But that's probably one of the biggest learnings I've had in the past few years, and what I look to accomplish on a daily basis. So
amazing, love it. I think customer experience, meeting them where they want to be met, like the consumer is so different nowadays than they were before. Spending time with a customer and just like it's having your manager spend time with the guests to like know to get that feedback, to get that firsthand feedback. Well, thank you so much for the time today, Ari.
Thanks for having me.
Amazing. And to wrap it up, every restaurant has a story. We're here to learn the playbooks that built the world's greatest restaurants and how you can apply them as a founder, an owner, an operator, or investor yourself. So we'll catch you next time. Thank you so much.
Bye now.